witness recent events in the Middle East. Nevertheless, we should not shy away from risk or change. Each generation should keep its rendezvous with change and with history. The society and its next generation of leaders should work with Lee White and the NCH to advocate stronger history programs, with the Office of Management and Budget to convince it of the value and savings a history office can provide in federal agencies, and the Office of Personnel Management to upgrade the basic requirement for a federal historian to more than 18 hours of undergraduate history courses. You should restore federal history office advisory committees, consisting of prominent historians who understand the necessity for strong programs and powerful outside advocates for federal offices. And if you really feel revolutionary, you should lobby the President of the United States to issue an executive order establishing history offices in every agency. As the torch of federal history passes, don't be afraid of being burned a few times. You will learn more from the failures than the successes. Nonetheless, I hope my generation has left you in the next generation a strong legacy upon which to build, or even reinvent, if you will, the future of federal history. Thank you.
If you have a few questions, we have a few minutes left. We have microphones on either side. I would ask you to use the microphones because this is being recorded and we want your voice in the record. So it's hard to see up here with these bright lights, but if you have a question, please raise your hand and come to a microphone. And please introduce yourself when you ask your question.
My name is Andrew Sorokowski. I work for the Department of Justice. You mentioned a situation where a group of historians, as I understand it, was employed with relation to in a court case, and the research that those historians did was used or was available to both plaintiffs and defendants, which is a model which I think makes sense. The model that, as far as I'm aware, is usually employed is the one where plaintiffs and defendants, of course, hire different companies and to do essentially the same research, so that at the archives you actually have people from both sides sometimes vying for the same documents. I think the problem with that is perhaps it seems a bit wasteful. Both sides, of course, are committed to doing honest and even-handed history. But I'm just wondering what your thoughts would be on those two models. Do you feel that one is better than the other? Do you have any thoughts on that? Thank you.
Good question. It is very difficult to get both parties to agree to have a sort of, I would say, a central research facility. In this case, it was driven largely because of the classification levels of weapons-related documents, and so rather than to just get everyone cleared, they cleared us, and we did the work for both sides. When similar situations have come up in the private sector since then, we found it very, very difficult to get agreements on both sides because lawyers inject themselves. I hope I'm not going to offend too many lawyers here in the room, but lawyers tend to inject themselves how they would do it, and they are rarely disinterested. So that's why we have full employment for lawyers, so once you work on one side, for example, you can't work on the other. A very good example of that is cases regarding Native Americans. they're very sharp about drawing a line between the working for plaintiffs or defendants. So the legal system's never been accused of being inexpensive.
Arnita Jones, American Historical Association, retired. My question is about graduate education. I'd like to know, Phil, what you think, what kind of impact History Associates has had on the graduate education of historians, what kind of connections or direct relationships the company has had, and whether you think there might be something that could be done in the future.
Well, this is, I think, Arnita, one of my great failings. We have tried several times to bring the news to graduate programs in both locally here and elsewhere. And most traditional programs with traditional faculty have tended not to welcome applied historians. They still see things in terms of classroom nature. Public history programs, I have certain personal experiences with those that they've not been terribly responsive either. I don't believe that that History Associates falls into either of those, though we do hire trained historians, but the problem of dealing with departments is that they are not prepared to send PhD students to us, or are they prepared to change the way they teach. Some years ago, I asked a department if they would mind having their term papers, allowing students to do term papers in a group, and that rather than doing the term paper, they could do a DVD, which would allow them to include printed, audio, and visual items to make the to tell the story, to do the paper. The department, not one member of the department could adjust to do something like that, in part because they don't know how to judge people except individually. And I mean, how many of us just work alone? The hardest, it seems to me, the most difficult federal office you can be in is the one where you're the lone historian. We need to convince the academic world that teaching is, I mean, the proof's in the pudding. You can't keep turning out students for jobs that don't exist, and you might as well give students some kind of background of alternative types of, in fact, teaching, I believe, has really become the alternative. What if I were a member of a department, I would say, geez, let's look at some of this stuff and give people an opportunity to take courses on entrepreneurship, give people not just accounting, but business practices, and also working in groups. I mean, history is one of the few professions without an applied tradition, and because of that, it suffers. And it suffers both in terms of the job opportunities and the economic rewards that that those professionals get. It will, as long as they do that, it will, I think, always become a low-paid profession.
We have a question over here.
I guess there are two questions there. And I'll go with the law firms first. For some years, law firms have added historians, and it seems that every time that there's a pinch in the legal profession, and as you know, recently there has been, they are looking for better values, and we have found that we provide a better value than perhaps, again, an historian working by himself or herself. Teams do better, and I think at this point our skills and long-term skills are unmatched in terms of the legal profession. Do we have? Are there other people out there, competitors? The answer is yes. There are people who compete in various areas, but I think I'm safe to say that there's probably no company in the country that competes across the board in the kinds of things we do. There are a number of companies that do primarily CRM, cultural resource management work, which, as I said, we don't do. And we found recently this last recession has shaken out a few competitors as well. Does that respond?
This has to be the last question.
Hi, my name is Melanie Schmidt. I'm here from the University of California at Los Angeles, where I'm a doctoral candidate. And I wanted to ask you, in terms of graduate students who often do find themselves in departments that are unprepared to provide students with the kind of training that you've been talking about, if you have any advice either for graduate students or for graduate student groups. I've been involved in the graduate student organization at our university, how we might better prepare ourselves to come to an organization like History Associates prepared.
Well, I think the first and inexpensive step is to get someone to talk to the department, and that is not just the graduate students, but the department itself, to see if they will listen to these kinds of things. And this can be through either federal history. I know Sam Walker and I we're trying to put on dog and pony shows up and down the East Coast on this to do balance federal history and applied history, but we didn't get much of a response. And I remember the meeting we were supposed to give at Maryland. We went to the meeting room and it was locked, so that was a real an omen. So I think you start with the department. The second is to be aware of the kinds of things that are going on. We spend a good deal of time training people who come to work for us in the sense of what we think they need to do beyond their normal historical training in any case. And so we think that's an important part of our program. We invest heavily in that. And it would be sure cheaper for us if departments would do some of that beforehand. So, but to ask the department if you have a speaking program, bring someone out and listen, maybe.